Well, firstly, a good morning, everybody, or a good afternoon, and a really warm welcome to this session. It gives me great pleasure to welcome a very distinguished set of panelists and individuals to come in and share their thoughts on this topic, which is energy transition for climate change. Uh, in terms of the individuals we have today, I'd like to welcome, Shri Rameshwar Prasad Gupta, the Secretary MNRE, Shri Indu Shekhar Chaturvedi, also Secretary MNRE, and then Vineet, a good friend, who's of course the Chairman of Avada Group, and not last but not least, but another very good friend of Dr. Praveer Sinha, who is the CMD for the CEO and Managing Director, for the Tata Power Company. So a warm welcome to everybody, and really looking forward to a great session here. I know that a number of us have talked about the implications of the climate change and across a range of different sort of forums. And what we have come to understand, and if anything, the recent IPCC report has created more urgency around, is the need for companies and corporates, as well as society overall, to take urgent action towards climate change, and not just building some of the resilience and adaptation, which is of course an important part of the journey, but also considering what are some of the changes that we need to make in terms of our systems, and specifically the energy transition that we need to make to be able to deliver that. Now, what's quite key is that there are a range of different factors, I think, in terms of adopting the energy transition that's there. And as a provider of energy solutions, we would come back and consider that it is, of course, not only the nature of clean and renewable, but included in this is the need for it to be affordable, to recognize that there must be adequate supply of the sources themselves, that we must have the ability to expand for further expansion, that there must be optionality, that we need to create flexibility for our customers and consumers in terms of how they consume the energy, and to be able to make their choices quite dynamically, actually, than they have in the past. And equally, the flexibility to have a range of different producers. The intention of not creating a concentration, whether it's a number of companies or governments or countries, of energy suppliers is actually quite key. And we saw some of that play out over the last couple of weeks and months in terms of various conversations, and specifically also the sense of energy independence that was, of course, expressed by the Prime Minister in his August 15th address. In light of this particular world, we have an incredibly amazing set of solutions that are emerging. Some that are here and ready now, and the ability to come back and adopt those solutions is absolutely available, whether it's solar power, wind power, in the renewable energy space. But equally, you're starting to see the rate of Industry 4.0 and technology digital solutions starting to deliver emissions reductions and improvements. And you're starting to see some other sort of technologies shift from a technology readiness level to a commercialization stages and going forward. There are some technologies that will take more time. Hydrogen, as a case in point, is one of those ones that will have its own, time to mature as we learn our way in terms of how this can become a solution for us as we go forward. Two aspects that are quite important, but I think sometimes understated in this entire journey, is that one has to be clear demand signals and demand drivers to come back and make some of the transition. And the reality is that, of course, this has to be done in lockstep, because neither could the demand be ahead of the supply, nor can the supply be ahead of the demand. And the more that we are able to synchronize the demand and supply side and be able to create the right set of demand drivers, the more we will be able to make and accelerate this transition going forward. And some of this also has to come in, not just from a consumer level, but also as corporates making choices amongst their supplier bases to suggest that they will only come in and procure products, which have a certain emissions level going forward. But yes, even consumers, starting to make quite discrete choices basis their preferences. For example, electric vehicles, or how they want to come back and consume their energies going forward. As a case in point, we have seen in some of our countries where we have offered nature-based offsets to vehicles and motorists. And we see take-up rates in the 30+% rates just by simply giving that option to somebody. And we see similar statistics in some countries where we have, aviation offsets are available as a case in point. So being able to have the range of choices and business models that give consumers the ability and customers to express their preferences and how they want to see their energy as, and at what emission level they want to see their energy is going to be quite important. And that's the first one. But the role of policy, of course, cannot be understated in terms of what we do going forward. And because the policy creates the landscape for us, it creates a certainty in terms of what we're trying to come back and achieve. And the more we have clear line of sight in terms of what, where we're going to go, the more we're able to come back and do that. And I think it's commendable the clarity that the Indian government created with the NDC submission and the COP20 in COP and Paris. And with a clear view as to sectors and what it chooses to achieve in renewable power, in afforestation, as well as energy efficiency. And that clarity has led to the ballooning of an industry and a tremendous amount of forward momentum by a huge number of players in terms of what we can come back and do. And hence, as Shell and we have come back and suggested that and encouraged that the more we can adopt more sectors or to create further clarity in other spaces, the more we will be able to create the requisite momentum across both producers, infrastructure developers, suppliers, customers, and consumers to all rally behind and be able to take that forward. And this is where I think it's incredibly important that clear policy comes in and gives us the guiding light to be able to do it, and with the clear mechanisms that's there. So with that, let me sort of tee up what is going to be a fascinating session and conversation. And let me begin by inviting Shri Rameshwar Prasad Gupta, the Secretary for MNRE, to give his opening remarks.
Thank you, CII, and all the viewers who have joined us on this virtual platform today. First of all, let me clarify, I am Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and not MNRE, which my colleague Mr. Indusekhar Chaturvedi is. Thank you for inviting me for this session today. Very good afternoon to you all. It's really great privilege for me to be invited to this very important event. I am pleased to extend my warmest greetings to all. It gives me immense pleasure to address this distinguished virtual gathering here at the conclave of the Green and Clean Planet. I commend CII for this platform that has brought together relevant stakeholders, especially during a time like the present. When I'm speaking here on the important and timely topic of energy transition for climate action, obviously we are meeting at a very difficult time in the pandemic. While on the one side, the fight is still on to control the pandemic, we need to simultaneously take action on just energy transition and positive climate action. Climate change, as the recent IPCC report has highlighted, and I don't think we required the IPCC report to tell us that. We have been all experiencing it in the form of extreme events, which we all have seen. The frequency and the intensity has increased in the recent times. And it's increasing the global warming, rising sea levels, extreme weather events, drought, floods, storm and cyclone, etc. We are all experiencing it and we all feel the need to control it. But at the same time, we are also one of those countries where the developmental aspirations have still not reached at the level which are required for meeting some basic level of comforts which our citizens need. We happen to be one of the fastest growing economy in the world and have witnessed rapid increase in energy consumption. In spite of this rising energy consumption needs, we still remain one of the countries where the per capita consumption of energy is only about 1/3 of the world average. Forget about comparing with the developed world. Our energy needs, therefore, are going to increase, and the rise in the energy consumption is mainly going to be contributed by rapid economic growth, access to affordable energy for all, increased industrialization, building the infrastructure and other end uses of it. In recent years, we have emerged a global leader in addressing global climate change and promotion of sustainable development. Clean energy transition is the key to unlocking the solutions for the climate challenge which all of us face. And we remain at the forefront of global efforts through a very ambitious energy transition towards renewables and other climate actions. At COP15 and COP21 in 2015 in Paris, we had taken certain NDCs in terms of 40% of our power generation capacity coming from renewables and our emission intensity going down by about 30 to 35% from 2005 level by 2030. Apart from this, there was another goal on creating the carbon sinks in terms of the increased forest. Carbon sink of about 2.53 billion tons of additional forest in terms of carbon sink to be created. We have actually overachieved in a sense that when we took the stock by 2016, our emission intensity had already come down by 24% from 2005 levels, whereas we have to reduce it by 35% by 2030. So surely we are going to overachieve it. Same is the case with non-fossil capacity. But non-fossil capacity is already above 39% as against 40% that we are required to do. How have we done it? There have been, as Nitin said, very clear policy guidelines which have led to it. If we have to reduce our emissions, which of course are about 1/3 of the world average in per capita terms, we have to focus on a broader way on three things. First of all, as our Honorable Prime Minister has said, we have to focus on our lifestyle, which what he said, adopting a sustainable lifestyle, which means that, and if we talk in terms of the terms which we use for it, it's more on the circular economy and reducing our requirements. Second thing is focusing more on the energy efficiency. Whatever we have to achieve, we have to do it efficiently, whether it is supply side or demand side. From both the side, the energy efficiency, we have to achieve whatever we can do for it. And I'm very happy to share it that our main agency for it, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, has done a great job. Their scheme of PET, the government scheme of LED bulbs, which we distributed, have all led, apart from the industry, of course. Industry has been a leader in reducing the energy requirement and increasing the energy efficiency. Third, what we need to do is changing the basket of the energy, increasing more share of non-fossil energy and reducing the use of fossil energy. But we all know that whether it is efficiency, whether it is circular economy, or whether it is renewable energy, whether they are driven voluntarily or whether they are driven through a policy regulations, they all have a cost attached to it. The cost of renewable, of course, have been brought down, and our share of renewable energy in terms of capacity has, of course, increased tremendously. But in terms of generation, also we have reached to a level of about 12 to 13% in electricity. But probably these were the low-hanging fruits which we have been able to achieve so far. The renewable energy, whatever was generated, we have been able to absorb in that grid without affecting the grid much. But now we require the solutions for absorbing more energy. We require the storage solutions. We require other solutions which can make this energy available around the clock. And obviously, we all know the cost of stable renewable energy is much higher. The climate change, apart from the mitigation action which we have to take, also requires us to adapt to the situation of the new temperature levels. There are all sectors of economy are going to be affected by it, be it agriculture, be it industry, be it coastal areas, be it buildings, whatever sector we name is going to have an impact on it, and we have to develop the adaptive capacity for this time and meeting our requirement. That is where the two match, and the cost of mitigation, which is put additional cost which is put on our economy, and the cost for adaptation is what we require from the world in terms of climate finance. We have done our bit. In fact, we have done and we are going to do more than we promised. But unfortunately, the other part, which was announced in Paris in terms of helping the developing country through climate finance, that has not happened. Nevertheless, we hope that it will come. But we, being one of the major economy, realize our responsibility. So we have not been part of the problem, but definitely we realize we have to be part of the solution. And global warming and climate change is something which is going to affect us as well. So Honorable Prime Minister has announced a new target of 450 gigawatt. This is to be achieved by 2030. Now that's a new goal for us. We will definitely achieve in terms of whatever has been announced. And the policies which we have been following so far, they will have to be taken forward in much more in the sectors which have been untouched so far. Energy efficiency, we have to increase it much more. The renewable energy, of course, has to increase substantially along with this storage. And the policies for the circular economy through regulations that will have to come through. And we are all working on it. And I'm very happy to acknowledge the role which industry has played. We have had 2 CEO conclaves in the ministry, and the industry, rather than being guided by regulations, they have been much more forthcoming. And the new steps which have been announced in terms of hydrogen mission, the industry, we all know the announcements which have been made by the industry leaders. Whether it is electric mobility, the targets for which have been announced, the other steps which have been taken and we are going to take to policy measures such as ethanol blending, BS6, and various numerous measures. They all have been possible and will be possible with the involvement of industry wholeheartedly and sincerely. I know it puts a cost on it, and our consumers bear it, industry bears it, but this is something which we all will have to. So I again thank the organizers for inviting me for this event, and with the support of all, we as a nation will be able to showcase our achievements and the policies which we are going to put in, and we have put in the coming COP26 at last week. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sri Gupta, and apologies. Let me now invite Sri Indushekar Chaturvedi, Secretary MNRE, for his comments.
Thank you very much. Sri Rameshwar Prasad Gupta, my colleague and Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Mr. Nitin Prasad, Mr. Vineet Mittal, Dr. Praveer Sinha. Thank you very much for inviting me to this event. Let me begin by something which was said in the initial remarks. Public policy is indeed very important when it comes to renewable energy. And let me also say that public policy choices will be more favorable to RE in the coming times, and that is a momentum which we are going to see worldwide. It's partly a function of the growing awareness among everyone that it's important to fight climate change. I will touch only on the RE sector. My colleague has already talked about broader issues, so I'll confine myself to the remit of my ministry. To put things in perspective, MNRE today is responsible for less than 2% of the total energy needs of the country. And that is where we are. The figures of installed RE capacity and the generated RE capacity are well known. The RE generation is only about 12-13% of the total electricity generation. Now, things are going to change, and things are going to change rapidly. We have a very ambitious target of 450 gigawatt going forward. And if we go by projections, that will mean about 45% of the total installed 45% of the total electricity generated will be through RE, including large hydro, and 55% of the total installed RE capacity will be 55% of the total installed capacity will be through RE. Now, the targets are huge, and there's a lot of work to be done. So it would be instructive to see what has been done in the past, because our RE capacities have indeed increased very rapidly in the last about 6-7 years. So there are a couple of things which the government has done, not a couple of things, a number of things which the government has done, which has been responsible for this capacity addition. And I think we should take a cue from what we have done to think about the future also. So firstly, in the initial days of RE, there was this huge support in terms of accelerated depreciation, feed-in tariffs, subsidy, direct subsidy, etc. And then we have had a very effective mechanism through SECI and other implementing agencies of demand aggregation, payment security, and which has resulted in the drastic lowering of tariffs which we have seen. The record tariff of about 1.99 rupees for solar was achieved about 6 months back, I think. And then the renewable purchasable obligation, which are not really enforceable at this point. I mean, they are enforceable, but they are not being enforced by the state regulators. But they have also played a key role in persuading the distribution companies to purchase renewable energy. Going forward, I think the thrust on the private sector will continue. Our capacity additions will continue to come from the private sector. I think there will be a tilt toward storage, more firm dispatchable power, and the projections of the optimal generation mix study say that that from 25-26 storage will be economical. So what we will concentrate upon is the ease of doing business, having a very facilitative framework for investors and developers so that RE capacities can be added significantly. We will also try to have a stronger legal mechanism for enforcing things like RPO. And if that happens, then I think that will be a major step toward in favor of renewable energy. So we have a number of programs in the renewable energy sector. I would just like to mention a couple of things, both from the present and going forward. So we have a very ambitious program for agriculture, that is PM Kusum, and one variant which we have introduced is solar level feederization, and we expect to add a lot of RE capacity through this variant. In fact, given the present outlays, there is a potential of addition of 27 gigawatt of capacity through feeder level solarization. This is solar capacity, and this obviously is a huge number. It will cover about 5 million pumps, 50 lakh pumps. We have ambitious plans in hydrogen, and so broadly our strategy is to increase the share of electricity in the economy, electrify the economy, and increase the share of RE in our electricity mix, which Secretary Environment has already touched upon. Now, there are some sectors where electrification might not work, grid-connected electrification or battery storage. And there are some industrial sectors where hydrogen and ammonia are used as a feedstock. So there, hydrogen will play a very important role. So the strategy will be to create demand in the initial years, leading up to scale up of hydrogen technologies, and therefore to a reduction in price. And once the price has reduced enough, the really hard to abate sector, the really difficult ones like long haul transport and steel can be covered, say by 2030. So the hydrogen mission I know has been talked about a number of times, but we are now at a stage where we'll shortly circulate it for interministerial consultation in a week or 10 days. And that would cover the green hydrogen obligations, which would imply that certain industrial sectors would be obliged to purchase a certain share of their hydrogen/ammonia requirements from green sources. It would also, now hydrogen can really be useful only if we have sufficient electrolyzer manufacturing capacity. So we also have plans of introducing incentives for electrolyzer manufacturing, and that will be a part of the mission document, the hydrogen mission, green hydrogen mission document, which Honorable Prime Minister has announced. The one area where we are very hopeful of success, and all indicators point out that we should be successful, is solar manufacturing. And fortunately, a number of measures have come together to facilitate this sector, and those include the increased customs duty from 1st April 2022, creation of domestic demand, and the incentive for solar manufacturing, the performance-linked incentive. The response to performance-linked incentive bids has been huge, and we have seen bids of about total, I think, more than 50 gigawatt capacity. And a number of these bids, a substantial capacity, is for integrated solar manufacturing, started from polysilicon to the modules. So this is broadly the direction the MNRE is thinking about. Of course, we have multilateral we have been instrumental for a major multilateral initiative also, and that is in the form of the International Solar Alliance, which is a TT-based organization. And I think the coming time will also see a greater thrust in a greater energy in the activities of the International Solar Alliance, and particularly in the One Sun, One World, One Grid initiative, which is being implemented in its very initial parts in partnership with the International Solar Alliance. And the One Sun, One World, One Grid initiative, which also was announced by Honorable Prime Minister, is also likely to see partnerships with the Green Grids initiative of the UK. And that would also be a major thing toward global uptake, global generation and global uptake of renewable energy, matching supply and demand, reducing the problem of intermittency, and transmitting energy across political borders. So I think I will conclude at this point. As was mentioned in the initial remarks, it's important to synchronize demand and supply, and that is a very fine call to take through public policy, and it's a difficult thing to do, but we'll attempt doing that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. With that, let me then shift over. Vineet, can I invite you next to share your comments?
Thank you. Thank you, Nitin. And good afternoon to Secretary Gupta and Chaturvedi ji, and good afternoon, friends. Today's topic, as you heard from both our secretaries, is something which our Honorable Prime Minister is very passionate about. And he's the one who actually started talking about energy transition much before many of us even got into the industry. And inspired by his vision, some of us, including me, who got into the clean energy space, I was into the IT space. And what he used to say, energy transition means not only in the change in the source of energy, but change in the state of energy system as a whole. And energy transition is something which is now become essential to the existence of mankind on Earth. The extreme events, whether it's a forest fire in California, forest in Amazon, large-scale flood in our own country, serves as a reminder of disaster that humanity is likely to witness more often if we are not able to contain the global warming. So when we are talking about global warming and climate change, what we are looking at is making sure that if we can't give a better future to our next generation, at least they have every right to get the nature in the format which we have got from our forefathers. And in this global challenge, as our Secretary MOEF rightly mentioned, though India was not responsible to cause this challenge largely, but India is part of solution. And being part of solution, even today, if you look at coal continues to be the major power generation, and brown power continues to be the transportation source, and it accounts for almost 75% of total emission which our country is facing. And some of the policy anomaly which exists today probably needs attention of both our secretary to debate it at the government level. Though our government has done a fair amount of amazing work in advocating and advancing green transition, but what needs to be addressed that coal still accounts for 70% of total generation in India. And it is the matter of concern that government still continues to subsidize coal-based power generation through low price for coal. And through the coal linkage policy, coal is provided to thermal generators at around 800 to 1000 rupees a ton, whereas same coal fetches rupees 2500 to 3000 a ton in e-auction in India. So if we analyze this number, subsidies of more than 1 lakh crore is kind of given to thermal power sector. And such a massive subsidy in times when emission continues to threaten the existence of mankind is beyond justification. And probably policy makers have a larger agenda to provide energy access to every citizen. But there could be some policies through which underprivileged can be continued to given power at a cheaper rate, but subsidizing the whole thermal sector needs to be relooked at. And the same way, if you look at the current changes in the sector is also slightly discouraging, that coal continued to be taxed at 5%, whereas solar sector, we have new GST of 12%. So despite government having such a positive framework to encourage adoption of green energy, the taxation policy and incentives, as it seems, are more tilted towards the thermal generation, which needs a fair examination. And also, if we have to look at kind of energy transition, the shift of supply should be from a centralized model to decentralized generation. India is a very diverse country, and we have more than 700 districts. And unfortunately, the concentration of solar and wind is in less than 100 districts, and more concentrated in 4 to 5 states. What it means is that solar, which can be fairly decentralized, with each of these districts having 50 megawatt with the storage capacity. Currently, instead of following the decentralized model, we are going through the mega scheme where we are setting up like an ultra megawatt thermal power project, ultra megawatt solar projects, where we have projects of 4 to 10 gigawatt or 20 gigawatt coming in the same location. And in solar, after a certain level, the benefit of scale doesn't benefit. So I would request Secretary Sir to examine this also, that in longer run, the true advantage of energy transition would happen when every district or probably every village is generating their own energy requirement with proper storage. And on hydrogen, our Honorable PM has made a huge policy announcement, and as MNRE Secretary just mentioned, that in next 2 weeks we would have some concrete step and formal policy. I would like to take this opportunity to mention that even our organization and industries are very excited about investing in batteries and hydrogen-based storage solution to overcome the challenges on reliable power supply. And some of the things which can drive these changes, like when we got into the solar, we used to get a tariff of 17 rupees, and now the tariff has fallen to 2 rupees level. And even with the localization of entire manufacturing value chain, which is happening through PLI, the costs are estimated to be lower than 3 rupees. And if we come with the similar policies on the green hydrogen, currently the cost structure would mean that green hydrogen will be available to the industry at 350 to 400 rupees a kg, which is not viable. And if you have to bring it closer to the brown hydrogen, which is around 150, 160 rupees per kg, some of the policy changes can ensure that it happens, which is through probably 30 to 35% capital subsidies on production of electrolyzer, and tax break to the companies manufacturing electrolyzer, and compulsorily wheeling and banking of green energy used on hydrogen production to be free of wheeling and banking or any cross-subsidy charges. And as Secretary Sir was saying, introduction of green hydrogen purchase obligation on brown industry. With those measures, we had done some maths, and it's easily possible to bring green hydrogen at similar cost structure to brown hydrogen, and that would increase a huge adoption. And like what solar and wind has done, that from 17 rupees tariff to lower than the thermal tariff, despite incentive being more aligned to brown power. Same thing would happen in the green hydrogen, and it will be a game changer, and India will become the role model for rest of the world in energy transition. And finally, I would like to suggest on adoption of electric vehicle. As I mentioned earlier, the transport sector is the second largest emitter, and with rapid adoption of EV, we can reduce the effect on the transport sector. And government has taken several steps on adoption of EV, but the results have not been as encouraging as what we have seen in the renewable energy sector. And I think we need to have more aggressive and assertive policy measure to encourage adoption of EV. I think the time has come where we bring a more capital subsidy to encourage consumer adoption, and probably waiver on registration charge, reduction on taxes, on input raw material like battery, etc. So there are so many low-hanging fruit which can be used by the government to switch over from combustible engine to EV. And one of the other thing to look at that historically also we have been weaker on R&D on the energy in total, and maybe government should consider like what Linux did is it was a transformative operating system in the IT space, and it brought down the cost of all the Unix platform and operating system, where every developer or every engineer could develop something on the back of Linux operating system. Something similar should be considered in the area of energy, where the energy research econet is provided on the public domain, and something combination of Google and Linux is created by the government, where all the R&D on the energy space is available to Indian youth, and who will then transform and bring a new technology which would solve for the future problem and the future energy need. One of the good effect of PLI by the government of 1,90,000 crore would be on the energy need, and the back of envelope calculation of that level of PLI demonstrates we will need around 70,000 megawatt of additional power just to cater to these new industry which would be moving back to India. And if you translate that into a solar and wind requirement, we are looking at more than 300 gigawatt of requirement for PLI linked investments which will happen across manufacturing value chain. So with those steep level of energy requirement coming in the near future, we should be looking at more and more efforts on R&D and policy intervention, so that the future model of our energy growth and economic requirement and environment is a fairly balanced one, and India becomes the leader in green energy transition and green energy innovation, where in every aspect of our life we are more sustainable, and we become the model which the world would like to emulate. Thank you, CII. Thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you very much, Vineet. Let me now invite Dr. Praveer Sinha to come and give his remarks. Praveer, over to you.
Thank you, Nitin, and good afternoon Mr. Rameshwar Gupta, Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Mr. I.S. Chaturvedi, Secretary, MNRE, my friend Vineet Mittal, and all the viewers who are there today as a part of this discussion. I think the issue that has been brought out very clearly in the earlier speakers, clean and green planet is something which is not a choice. This is something which is a necessity and is staring at us that how do we ensure that our planet remains and is not impacted by the type of climate changes that we are seeing in last few decades. And especially in last few years, globally, but is also impacting our country. For us, it's a survival issue, and I think for India, this is a great opportunity to bring about a change and transformation at a very quick pace. Starting with how the renewable landscape is changing. It started many years back, way back in '94, when the first policy came in. And since then, there has been huge amount of changes, starting with wind and in the initial phase, run of the river, mini hydel projects. We have in last 10 years seen a huge amount of solar that has come in. And from a tariff which used to be in the middle double digit, it has now come to a very, very low tariff, which is very competitive. And this demonstrates that India has a capability, has the wherewithal to really put large scale solar plants, which will meet the requirement of the country. When we talk of renewable energy, we need to talk of it in totality. We should not be looking at it in terms of solar or wind, but how do we integrate renewable energy? And I think we have a great opportunity to put together our solar plants, our wind plants, our storage solutions which are there today, and also many of our non-carbon generation from hydel plants. And these can be large hydel as well as many of the other smaller hydels are there, and some pump storage is there. And how do we bring about the generation from these plants to meet the load requirement? Various studies have proved that the load requirement is not a flat line, and it is not something which is constant throughout the day, and it is also not constant throughout the year. So there is an opportunity to generate in such a way so that it meets the optimum load requirement or the demand requirement. There is also an opportunity now that through demand response and demand side management, we can control the demand in such a way that it is used in an optimal basis, and only when we have the peak generation at that time, some of those demands can be utilized more. And during the off-peak period, more of the energy can be utilized, and thereby optimally utilizing the resources that is available with us. Fortunately, the technologies are there, and I think the way we are going forward, more and more of these will get penetrated into the market, whereby we will have hybrid solutions, which will be a mix of solar, wind, and also storage. And again, in the storage, there can be various technologies. While we have always been looking at the so-called lithium-ion technology, there are other chemistries also which are available. And I think the flow batteries and some of the other chemistries of batteries can also be utilized depending upon the application and use in supply of electricity. The second area that I think which was touched by the earlier speakers was about the decentralization of electricity. Today, we have very little of decentralized electricity. We can have rooftop solar, and these can be not only for industries and commercial use, but can also be used by residential consumers. The penetration level of rooftop solar is very, very low at this stage. And there are a whole lot of challenges because the existing discoms do not want that the rooftop solar penetration should take place. This is because the high-paying consumer are the ones who will go away, and the low-paying consumers or the subsidized consumers will stay with the discom. I think the policy changes that needs to be brought in to promote open access, reduce the cross-subsidy charges and the other charges which are levied by the discoms and the regulators, and promote a level playing field whereby the option is given to the users, which can be industry, commercial, or residential, whereby more and more of rooftop solar or even ground-mounted solar can be used by them to meet their requirement. The other area that Secretary MNRE mentioned about Kusum, and he mentioned that the new program talks about 50 lakh pumps. But my submission is that in this country there is 3 crore pumps, that is 300 lakh pumps are there. 90 lakh pumps are running on DG sets. The 90 lakh at least should be changed in the first instance to solar pumps. And then, of course, the 100% solarization can take place. This is good for the discoms also, because the amount of money that they spend on transmitting power into villages and the line losses and the maintenance costs, as also it is good for the users, the farmers over there, because many a times the supply takes place in the midnight or early morning when they are not able to use it, and they typically keep their pumps on, which leads to burning of the pumps. So I think there is a great opportunity whereby instead of just talking about 50 lakh pumps, we should be talking of 300 lakh pumps, and how 100% solarization takes place next 5 to 10 years time. The other area that I feel that there is again a great opportunity is the microgrids. We have more than 6 lakh villages in India. Many of them are quite big villages, and there is an opportunity that these villages, you can have self-sustaining microgrids, which not only supply electricity to the residential consumer, but to all the economic activities that can be carried out over there, whether it is setting up of an RO plant, or it is an oil expeller, or it is atta chakki, or anything that can be done over there, including shops and dispensaries and other places. So I think the decentralization of electricity that can happen in a big way is an area which is still not touched very much. There are issues about making them commercially viable. But then once having done this, this will make the villages self-sufficient to generate and use that energy, and also will create the right ecosystem for carrying out economic activity and the growth and development that can happen in the villages. There were some discussions about the manufacturing, and Secretary MNRE did mention that large amount of offers have come, interest from Indian entrepreneurs have come. It's about 54 gigawatt. The quantum of PLI mentioned is very small. It's just 4,500 crore. I think it needs to get multiplied by 10. Zero needs to be added. The 4,500 has to become 45,000 crore. And I think the Indian industry is very kicked about the opportunity to be part and parcel of the greening of the grid and the greening of the planet. And I think this is a decade for India where India can leapfrog and show leadership in the new energy and the renewable energy. We are fortunate, most of the parts of our country, we have more than 300 days of sunshine, and we can really exploit and create a ecosystem whereby renewable energy not only gets produced and used in India, but can also be supplied to the other countries. I think the dream of one sun, one world, one grid is definitely possible. And I think India can take the leadership in this and really become a supplier of electricity, green electricity to many parts of the world. So I think it's a great opportunity for India to be a frontline player in the clean and green planet. and the opportunities which is there. The Indian industry has demonstrated their wherewithal to take the leadership in this. The Indian government has also provided necessary support, but I think many of the actions can be done much more faster and can be done in a much bigger way. So the RPO obligations, the various policy incentives, if they can be done at a faster pace, I think the days are not very far when we will do much more than 450 gigawatt that has been planned for 2030. So once again, my compliments to CII for bringing forth such an important topic for all of us in the Indian industry and part of CII. We feel blessed that we have got this sort of an opportunity to participate and also to contribute to the whole growth of clean and green energy that can happen. And from my side, I would like to wish the best to everyone and also commit that we are committed to this initiative and will play a very, very important role going forward. So thank you very much, Nitin, for the opportunity.
Great, thanks very much, Ravi. Team, I think we've had a fantastic panel discussion, and unfortunately hasn't left much time for Q&A. But just to recap, I think we've covered the spectrum of the need and necessity as was articulated very early on, but also very clearly the government actions and policy changes, and the intent is very clear to come back and make the changes as necessary. I think what also really stood out for me from both our secretaries was very much the collaboration with industry, referencing both the CEO conclaves, the opportunity to come and engage and listen and to make some of the changes and to work with industry to come in and deliver, and the role of private sector being very clear in their minds. I think what you heard from me and Vineet and Pravir was very much three different things. I think one, firstly, just the recognition that we do have a government that is coming in and supporting the journey forward and working to come back and deliver it. But equally, you're hearing a very strong commitment from ourselves, in terms of playing our role in that journey and continuing to drive and take that forward. But also some of the opportunities that exist to accelerate the change that is needed. So with that, I'd like to express my gratitude to Shri Gupta, Shri Chaturvedi, Vineet and Pravir. Thank you all for a absolutely wonderful session. I truly enjoyed it, and all the comments were very inspiring and very insightful, and incredible sort of inputs in terms of understanding how we can make the shift to cleaner and green energy. And finally, I think it's worth saying that it is very important for all of us to work collectively to make this planet clean and green. So thank you all very much.